Hello and welcome to our latest breaking news. Here are the detailed headlines. Please stay tuned.
Recently, Tehran affirmed that the U.S. is using the territory and airspace of Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, and Arid to plan, prepare, and attack Iran. The accusation was made by Iran's ambassador to the UN, Amir-Saeid Iravani, in a letter to Secretary-General António Guterres and the UN Security Council. The Tasnim news agency quoted Iravani as saying that based on continuous monitoring and assessment by Iran's armed forces, they have determined that the U.S. continues to use Bahrain's territory and airspace to plan, equip, and carry out illegal military attacks against Iran. Similar accusations were made against Qatar, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates in 4 other letters. In the letter regarding the UAE, Iran also accused the country of directly participating in aggressive acts. A UAE Air Force Mirette fighter jet, an Accuses drone, and an F-16 fighter jet allegedly violated Iran's airspace, attacking targets in the Strait of Hormuz and on islands including Qest, Abu Musa, Greater Tunb, and Lesser Tunb. The Financial Times and several other outlets reported that the U.S. is reinforcing its forces in the Gulf amid President Donald Trump's announcement to extend the ceasefire with Iran. The Financial Times, citing anonymous U.S. officials, revealed that the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush, along with 3 missile-equipped destroyers and about 5,000 soldiers, are en route to the region. This group will join at least 24 warships and over 50,000 soldiers already present in the area, where the U.S. has amassed its largest force since the Iraq War in 2003. Thousands of these soldiers are specially trained to seize enemy territory. Additionally, the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford unexpectedly returned to the Suez Canal after previously crossing the Great Bitter Lake. These indicators suggest the carrier is gradually approaching Iran. The USS George H.W. Bush is taking a longer route around the Cape of Good Hope to avoid potential threats in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, becoming the latest of 3 U.S. carriers deployed to the Gulf of Oman area. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff have outlined a framework to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, with a blockade line stretching across the widest part of the Gulf of Oman from the southern coast to the Iran-Pakistan border in the north. This plan involves not only maritime interdiction but also a complete missile defense structure. Concurrent reports also show a U.S. force buildup, including the deployment of a brigade from the 82nd Airborne Division, with estimates suggesting this force could be up to 10,000 soldiers. The U.S. Congress set a 60-day deadline for Trump to end the Iran conflict. This 60-day legal deadline in the U.S. is creating significant pressure, forcing President Trump to choose between ending the military campaign in Iran or seeking congressional approval to continue. According to the New York Times, during nearly 8 weeks of fighting in Iran, Republican lawmakers have repeatedly blocked Democratic efforts to halt the campaign and force President Trump, who initiated the conflict without congressional authorization, to consult legislators on military operations. However, some Republican members say a key legal deadline in the coming weeks could become a turning point, as they will demand the president de-escalate the conflict or seek congressional approval to continue. Democrats have repeatedly failed to invoke a provision of the 1973 War Powers Act, which aims to limit the president's ability to wage conflict without congressional approval, to oppose the war in Iran. The latest failure occurred days ago when Senate Republicans blocked a 5th such proposal since the conflict began. However, this law also sets specific timeframes, with the first deadline falling on the 1st of missing month, which could increase pressure on the Trump administration in the coming days. The following are provisions of the law regarding how long the president can commit U.S. forces to combat without congressional approval. When the U.S. began airstrikes coordinated with the Israeli Air Force on Iran, President Trump said he acted under his authority as Commander-in-Chief to protect U.S. bases in the Middle East and advance essential U.S. national interests. He also said the action was for collective self-defense of regional allies, including Israel. Many Democratic lawmakers disputed this argument, saying Trump acted illegally. Meanwhile, the White House and most Republicans argue he is acting within the legal framework, which allows the president 60 days to withdraw forces from a conflict without congressional authorization. Although the conflict began in late February, Trump formally notified Congress on the missing date, triggering a 60-day deadline ending on the 1st of missing month. Some Republican senators have signaled they will not support extending the conflict beyond this deadline. Under the law, after the 60-day mark passes, the president's options to continue military operations without congressional approval become significantly limited. At that point, Trump has 3 options: seek congressional authorization to continue, begin a phased withdrawal of U.S. involvement, or unilaterally extend the deadline. The law allows a one-time 30-day extension if the president certifies in writing that more time is needed to ensure safe withdrawal. However, this does not authorize continuing offensive operations. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, a leader in efforts to curb presidential war powers, said, "I think it will be hard for them to continue to look the other way past this deadline." Iran paraded missiles amid stalled talks, continued to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Recently, President Donald Trump chaired a closed meeting with the National Security Council at the White House to finalize the next U.S. course of action on Iran. As the ceasefire approached its final minutes, Air Force Two was ready on the runway at Joint Base Andrews, waiting to take Vice President James David Vance to Pakistan for the next round of talks. However, silence from Iran put the U.S. administration in a difficult position. Against this backdrop, Iranian ballistic missiles appeared in a pro-regime rally at Engelab Square, Revolution Square, in Tehran, as peace talks with the U.S. stalled. Images broadcast on Iran's state TV Irib showed crowds gathering in the square on the evening of April 21, just before President Trump announced the deadline for a ceasefire with Iran. The highlight of the rally was the appearance of the Khorramshahr 4 medium-range ballistic missile. Besides the Tehran rally, Iranian missiles also appeared at rallies in other cities on April 21. The rally occurred as peace negotiations between the U.S. and Iran were at an impasse. A commander of the Aerospace Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, threatened to attack oil production facilities of Gulf neighbors friendly with the U.S. Separately, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations, UKMTO, said Iranian IRGC speedboats did not issue warnings before opening fire. The agency also said no one was injured in the attack. However, Iran's Noor news agency reported that the forces only fired after the ship ignored warnings from Iranian armed forces. The Fars news agency described this as illegal enforcement of control over the Strait of Hormuz. The attack occurred shortly after President Trump announced Washington would extend the ceasefire indefinitely to give Iran more time to unify and present a proposal before the two sides meet again at the negotiating table. Iran has not officially confirmed the ceasefire extension announced by Trump. Hormuz could be closed for half a year. Trump hasn't decided on an endpoint with Iran. CNN, citing a knowledgeable source, reported that Pentagon officials this week briefed U.S. lawmakers on an intelligence assessment suggesting it could take up to 6 months to completely clear naval mines from the Strait of Hormuz after the conflict with Iran ends. According to the source, this intelligence assessment was presented to the House Armed Services Committee in a recent closed meeting. The assessment once again highlighted the profound economic and political repercussions a conflict could cause. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell said selectively leaking information from a classified meeting is largely misrepresentation and dishonest journalism. As we said in March, an assessment doesn't mean it's likely to happen, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz for 6 months is impossible and completely unacceptable to the Secretary of Defense. Meanwhile, President Trump said there is no timeline for the war with Iran and dismissed the notion that political factors are influencing his approach. In an interview with Fox News, the U.S. leader stated there is no time pressure regarding the ceasefire deadline he set or the peace negotiations with Iran. When asked when the war might end, Trump said there is no timeline and no need to rush. He had previously said the war would last 4 to 6 weeks, but it has now entered its 7th week. Trump said, "People say I want to end it quickly because of the midterm elections. That's not true," and asserted the administration wants a good deal for the American people. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump is satisfied with the economic pressure campaign on Iran and has not set a hard deadline for Tehran to respond. Leavitt told reporters that Iran can't even pay its own people due to the economic pressure President Trump has imposed. So, he's satisfied with that while waiting for their response. The press secretary asserted the U.S. knows who within Iran's leadership will approve the final agreement to end the war, despite U.S. officials observing internal divisions within the Iranian government. The most difficult nuclear problem in history, 440 kilograms of Iranian uranium causing global concern. According to former officials and experts, the U.S. has experienced transporting high-enriched uranium from abroad. But Iran's case presents unique difficulties. The process requires collecting nuclear material from facilities heavily damaged by U.S. and Israeli airstrikes and missile attacks in June 2025. Furthermore, transport depends on a political agreement on the destination of this uranium. According to IAEA estimates, Iran possesses approximately 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, a level far higher than the 3 to 5% needed for civilian use. This material is primarily stored at nuclear sites like Natanz and Isfahan, which were attacked in 2025. Russia's proposal is to transport and store this uranium outside Iran to reduce the risk of nuclear escalation. Russia's state atomic energy corporation Rosatom says it has the capacity for this mission, emphasizing its long experience cooperating with Tehran. Experts say technically, Russia is fully capable of handling and transporting the HEU, though the process would be very complex under conflict conditions, requiring close coordination between all parties to avoid security risks and accidents. One of the biggest challenges is the actual condition of this uranium due to airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Collecting and accurately determining the remaining quantity is extremely difficult. Experts assess that if implemented, this could become the most complex uranium relocation campaign in history. Beyond ensuring transport safety, parties must also address risks of contamination, material loss, and geopolitical tensions. However, many believe this problem is not unsolvable. With IAEA and mediator involvement, the control, monitoring, and handling process can be designed to minimize risks. A key reason Russia's proposal is receiving attention is the level of trust between Moscow and Tehran. Russia also has practical experience handling high-enriched uranium. In the past, Moscow cooperated with Washington to convert hundreds of tons of Soviet-era uranium into fuel for U.S. nuclear power plants. Nuclear relations between Russia and Iran also have a long history, notably the Bushehr nuclear power plant project where hundreds of Russian experts worked. Although the US, Europe, or China have similar technical capabilities, Russia is considered the most suitable partner for Iran in the current context. Despite technical feasibility, the proposal's future depends heavily on political decisions from Washington. President Trump's administration has shown no signs of support, while the US's true objectives in the conflict with Iran remain highly contested. Some experts believe Russia's initiative could become an interim solution to reduce tensions and pave the way for negotiations. However, without strategic consensus among the parties, any scenario remains merely potential. As the Middle East continues to see volatility, Russia's proposal shows the nuclear game is not just a military issue but also a complex diplomatic puzzle. Trump says Iran listened to US, revoked terrible decision at the last minute. President Trump said Iran will not execute 8 women involved in protests following his direct appeal to Tehran's leadership. Specifically, in a post on Truth Social, Trump said 4 of these women would be released immediately, while the other 4 would serve 1 month in prison instead of facing execution. Donald Trump wrote on the platform, adding that these women were previously believed to be facing execution. I greatly appreciate that Iran and its leaders respected my request and canceled the execution plan. Earlier, Trump had posted a direct message to Iran's leadership, urging them to free these women as a gesture of goodwill ahead of planned talks between Tehran and U.S. representatives. Trump wrote in that earlier post, "I would greatly appreciate it if these women were set free. I am confident they will also acknowledge that goodwill. Please do not harm them." This would be a very positive start to our negotiations. However, according to human rights organizations monitoring Iran's situation, the actual information is somewhat different. 2 of these women had been out on bail since month 2026, while 2 others face serious charges that could lead to execution. All were arrested during anti-government protest campaigns in month. The day before, Trump had reshared an image of this group of women, including 2 teenagers, along with a warning from a conservative activist about their risk of prosecution in Iran. Iran has denied that these women were about to be executed, stating that some of them have already been released. U.S. intercepts Iran-flagged oil tankers in Asian waters. Reuters, citing informed sources, reported that the U.S. military is believed to have intercepted at least 3 Iran-flagged oil tankers in Asian waters, redirecting them away from areas near India, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka. This move comes as Washington imposes a maritime trade blockade on Iran, while Tehran uses force to prevent ships from transiting the Strait of Hormuz, the strategic gateway to the Persian Gulf. Nearly 2 months after the U.S. and Israel launched a military campaign against Iran, prospects for resuming peace talks remain bleak as ceasefire agreements are repeatedly broken. In recent days, U.S. forces have seized 1 Iranian cargo ship and 1 oil tanker. Meanwhile, on date 22nd, Iran said it had captured 2 container ships attempting to exit the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz after firing on these vessels and another. This marks the first seizures since hostilities began. According to sources speaking to Reuters on April 22, the U.S. redirected at least 3 other Iran-flagged oil tankers in recent days. One of the targeted vessels was the Iran-flagged supertanker, name, carrying some crude oil. Sources and ship tracking data from marine traffic show the ship was last detected via its public transponder off the coast of Malaysia a week ago. A smaller Iran-flagged vessel, name, was last detected off Malaysia a month ago. The Iran-flagged supertanker, name, carrying about 2 million barrels of crude oil and last recorded off the southern coast of India 3 days ago, has also been intercepted. The U.S. military has not responded to requests for comment. U.S. and Iran tit for tat, intercepting and seizing a series of cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz. According to sources cited by Reuters, the U.S. military has intercepted and redirected at least 3 Iran-flagged oil tankers away from areas near India, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka in recent days. This move comes as Washington imposes a maritime trade blockade on Tehran, while Iran uses force to prevent ships from transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Affected vessels include supertankers like names. The name was confirmed to have been escorted by a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Indian Ocean after being accused of attempting to violate the blockade. Additionally, the tanker, name, is also believed to have been intercepted before it could unload its cargo before the deadline for exemptions on importing Iranian crude oil expired. As of April 22, U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, said it had ordered a total of 29 ships to turn around or return to their port of origin, though it has not released a full list of vessels involved. Alongside U.S. actions, Iran has also responded forcefully by seizing 2 container ships attempting to exit the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. Marking the first seizures since the conflict erupted, the closure of this strait has disrupted approximately 1/5 of global oil and gas supply, raising concerns about a widespread energy crisis and making the prospect of resuming peace talks bleak. Oil prices cool after Trump's announcement, markets remain on edge. In trading sessions, world oil prices eased slightly after President Trump announced a ceasefire deadline with Iran. Brent crude fell 0.3% to $98.16 per barrel at 14:21 Vietnam time, after hitting $99.38 earlier. U.S. West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude also fell 0.6% to $89.14 per barrel, after reaching $90.71 earlier in the session. Previously, both benchmarks had risen about 3% in trading on date 21st. President Trump's decision to extend the ceasefire is aimed at maintaining negotiations to end the conflict. However, markets remain concerned because this is a unilateral move by the U.S. He also stated the U.S. Navy would maintain its presence and control over Iranian ports, a move Tehran strongly opposes. The energy supply situation remains very tense, as the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway carrying about 20% of global oil and LNG supply, remains largely paralyzed with very few ships transiting, only 3 passing through the area in the past 24 hours. In Europe, despite the Druzhba pipeline, there are reports Russia will stop exporting oil from Kazakhstan to Germany via this route starting date 1st. Regarding market data, the American Petroleum Institute, API, reported crude inventories fell sharply by 4.5 million barrels last week. Analysts at PVM noted that falling oil reserves while export demand remains strong is evidence that consumers in Europe and Asia are scrambling at any cost to secure supply amid an ongoing crisis.